basically a lesser-known French grape. They embraced it, they renamed it, they called it Australian, rebaptized it, and they were able to ride that horse, in for a win. Now, they also sell their white wines very well too, and they're able to sell Chardonnays and other things. So it isn't just Shiraz, because they're white wines. And don't forget, Americans like white wines. Bad news update here, but Americans really do like white wines, in some cases more than they like red wines, and white wines tend to outsell red wines by significant numbers. So what Australians did with red wines, which is brilliant, is that they came up with this idea that our wines are big. What is a big wine? I'm not 100% sure. I think it's a wine that has a lot of flavor. But so they were able to come up with this whole idea of big. Our wines are big. It's like Australia. It's a big country. It's a continent. And I think they were successful in doing it. They were successful in taking white wine drinkers and getting them to try red wines. And I think that was one of the keys to their success. Anybody else? Yes? Good? No? Disagree with me? Go on, challenge.
I think they are good getting the new clients for wine. So people that wouldn't drink wine could start with an Australian wine. I think we would be in a role to get these consumers when they get more mature in the wine drinking.
Part of the problem with the Australian wine with the States is that we were saturated with lesser quality Australian wine. Like Yellowtail is now made for the American market, and it's a very poor quality wine, but it started out as a good quality wine.
Yeah, but it's good if they start with Yellowtail. It's okay, perfect. It's better they drink Yellowtail than they drink soda or
because what we get from Australia is crap. 90% of it is crap. We get this much of the good Australian, so that's part of the problem. So for Portugal, you need to start at a higher level and not necessarily start with your worst quality red wine.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Build a better market.
It's a good point. It's a good point on countries like Chile, and 100% of their best wines to the U.S. market, not 20%. Everything they make good gets on the boat and goes to the U.S. That's obviously not the case in Portugal. You have a tremendously strong domestic market and a lot of big fans in Europe. It's complicated. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying we're going to figure this out right now, right here, but I think that the important thing is to, let's not say we're going to wait for this market to meet our standards, because we're going to be waiting for a very long time. I think if the American market is going to be the biggest market in the world by 2015, we got to start now. In fact, we should have started a few years ago. This is our opportunity. This is our time. We have an outstanding product. There's nothing wrong with our product. It's really good. So what are we going to do to share our enthusiasm, our excitement, our pride in what we're making with the folks who are buying the wines in the U.S. And it's a challenge, but it can be done. And I think, to your point, let's not imitate what other people have done. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. At the same time, let's not be the next Australia in terms of how we're going to market our wines. I think that's a mistake, because Portugal is in Australia. And no, I'm sorry, the Alentejo is in Australia too. I've heard people say that. It drives me crazy. Portugal's Portugal. And our wines are Portuguese. So they don't have to be French, and they don't have to be Australian, they don't have to be New Zealand. They're Portuguese wines. So let's market them like Portuguese wines. Let's roll up our sleeves and come up with something which dignifies the many years of tradition we have, but also the amazing new thinking that has gone into this product over the last 10, 20 years. I think that's worth being proud of. Yes?
In Texas, our market is very young. So the 21 to 40-year-old group is very interested in New World wines.
Yes.
I think it's very important that Portugal align themselves with New World as opposed to Old World, because that's what the young consumer wants.
You're right.
And even though we have a very long history in Portugal, I think it needs to be marketed as a New World wine.
They're New World wine, New wines in the Old World. You actually said that, it's got the tradition of thousands of years, but new technology that isn't stuck in the disrespect to our colleagues in France and the French model. Even the French are embracing Australia or California. Very good point. Have we got anything else?
How can the existing Portuguese community in the US, especially in states like New Jersey, Massachusetts, protect in terms of passing across the image of Portuguese wines? This is a tricky question.
It's a very tricky question.
Because in the past, those communities were looked upon by us producers as an extension of the domestic market, and everything that would work in Portugal would work with them. So we didn't care about or we didn't take much care in creating a new marketing message for the export outside of those ethnic communities. We work with them, and they would pass to their local friends, and somehow that way some
That's a really good point, and it's a tough one to answer. Certainly, if it wasn't for that existing Luso-American community in places like Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, parts of Florida, Northern California, you wouldn't have the wines in the market. And why do Portuguese wines go in Boston? Because there's a Portuguese community that would buy them. Challenge is that immigration stopped about 20, 30 years ago, and the majority of it came during the 60s and 70s. So these people have been there for a while, and certainly they've assimilated themselves into the American community. Portuguese neighborhoods are starting to dissipate in parts of New England, for example. So you've got second, third, fourth generation Luso-Americans who in some cases have lost, like myself, I speak Portuguese, but have lost touch with their heritage. And it's the challenge to reach out to them because often their image of Portugal is what their grandfather talked about Portugal, and that Portugal doesn't really exist anymore. So there's that, and it's the challenge of making them ambassadors is difficult because often what they're looking for is the wines that they grew up with, which we still make and they're great, but they're not looking at the new Portuguese wines. And if they see $18, $20 a bottle for Portuguese wines, it's like, okay. You know, they're not, that's not what they're looking for. So I think there's got to be a way to engage them. I think there's got to be a way to educate them. If it wasn't for those folks, wouldn't have a foothold in the U.S. market. The problem is, I grew up in Chicago. There are Portuguese in Chicago.
But your view is that we have to invest in the U.S. market.
Yes. No. Well, I think it's part of the marketing puzzle, but it's a small part. I think the worst thing we can do is every time we promote Portuguese wines, we have Portuguese food. Because what we're saying is it's an ethnic product. You know, it's like Thai beer, right? I drink Thai beer when I go to a Thai restaurant, right? I don't drink Mexican beer when I go to a Mexican, well, that's not true. But the point is,